Hey everyone, how's everyone? Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. Good to see some new faces. Really glad you're here today. I know people are continuing to join us. But we'll get started here because I know we've got a limited amount of time together. Thanks for joining us. This is part of a new series, as you know, called The New Basics. This is on the mantras, the key mantras for taking action. And let me just sort of introduce this and give a little context, and then we're gonna jump right into it. Let me tell you why we started this new series now. We know that our network all across the United States, I see some folks from Canada as well, across Canada and other places, continues to grow. It's growing really rapidly. New people are joining every day. And even after 35 years of doing this work, we're still learning as an organization, as a network. We're still learning. We're still innovating as an organization and as a network. And we've had some recent breakthroughs lately, particularly over the last few years, that we want to make sure that we're sharing with you, because we're really committed to unleashing the full potential of this network all across the United States, Canada, and elsewhere, and making sure that you have all the resources that we can possibly provide that enable you to be as effective, as impactful in your work as possible, so that you can create impact and engender civic faith in the work that you do. So our commitment to you is that we're going to keep sharing new knowledge as we gain it. And the first down payment on that is this new series called The New Basics that we'll be holding over the next year. In between each of these sessions, you're going to be getting emails from us, which will be encouraging you to use what you learned in this webinar. And so those will start coming to you almost immediately. So here's what I hope you get out of today as we go through this together. One is some new content you can use on these mantras for taking action, right? Second, I'm expecting that you're going to print these mantras out. Someone, if you could, has a recording going, if you can mute your computer, that would be great. Thanks. I'm hoping that you can print these mantras out, that you post them where you can see them, you use them, and you spread them to some of your allies within your own organization and externally to your organization. And then what I'm hoping is that you'll come to future webinars. The next one's on the North Star, which is a new tool that we've created, which captures the essence of the practice, which will be really useful to you as you make use of this practice of turning outward on a daily basis. So let me just set up a little context for today, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, because in the typical Institute fashion, it wouldn't be an Institute event if I weren't asking some questions, right? So as you know, we're all coming out of, and I'm hearing this as I travel across the country more and more, we're all coming out of COVID. We're continuing to wrestle with systemic racism and social injustice. We're still dealing with the politics in our communities. More and more, the loudest voices in our community, the most divisive voices, the most acrimonious voices seem to be occupying more and more space. And in some of our communities, they're hijacking our public discourse, as you know. And people of goodwill are being pushed to the side in many respects, right, to the edges of public life. And what I'm hearing from a lot of folks all across the country is that they're tired, they're fatigued. Some of us are worn out from all these things that are happening. And so the question becomes, how can you keep going? How can you stay in motion? How can you keep doing the work that you want to do? And so today, around the key mantras, these mantras will help you keep going. They'll help you keep focused, and they'll help you keep using this practice so that you can create impact and engender civic faith in the work that you're doing. Everyone still with me here? The next part is going to require you to take off mute. You can also use the chat box, but I want to create two lists with you. A lot of you have been through this with me before. I like to create two lists that are juxtaposed to each other. So my first question is, we're just going to brainstorm on this really quickly. My first question to you is this: what makes you stuck in the work that you're doing at times? What makes you stuck? Lack of buy-in from others. What else?
Resistance.
Resistance. Anything?
Lack of finances.
Lack of finances. What else?
Funding.
Funding.
Lack of seeing real progress.
Right. Lack of seeing real progress.
Attitude of, we've always done it this way, so why change?
Okay. What else?
Old patterns and dynamics.
Okay. Old patterns. What else? Low change. I'm seeing in the chat box, needing to build trust. Lack of time to really focus. Okay. Everyone got those? So resistance, always doing the same things, old patterns, things are slow, lack of trust, as well as funding. Why is it hard? So that's one list. Second list, why is it hard to get moving? Why can it be hard for you to get moving?
It normally takes a champion or to find a champion or two in the group to keep it moving, to help assist a move.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. What else?
Everybody's so busy that it's so hard to get together and meet.
Okay, so busy. What else?
Well, along those lines, if you are busy or you feel kind of overwhelmed, you just can't motivate yourself to get started.
Right, right, exactly. Burnout, someone else said in the chat box. Go ahead.
And connected to that is gonna, you want to do it, but you're worried that you'll be able to deliver. So anxiety about really being fulfilled.
Anxiety. Okay. Great. What else?
I say clarity to support the first answer to your question. I said not asking the right questions and actively listening. And so clarity for the second question.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. What else? Anything else?
We tend to be reactive versus proactive.
I think that was the voice of Penny Christian, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see
Yes,
it.
sir.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good. How are you, Rich?
Anything else? Right. So we need to find a champion. We're busy. We can feel overwhelmed, burnout, anxiety about fulfilling what we're trying to do, sometimes a lack of clarity. Okay, resistance. All right. So keep those all in mind as we go through the next step here. So someone's going through some stuff. If you can mute your computer, your mic, that would be great. So when the Institute was doing our 30-year impact study, which led to the book Unleashed, which I know many of you have seen or read, what we found is that, as you know, is that people were creating change in these 9 communities that we looked at. And when we examined how they were creating the change, and we sat back and tried to think about, well, what's the essence of these 9 stories? What's really going on here? And if we had to encapsulate it in just a few phrases or a handful of phrases that would be helpful to people, what could it be? What could they be, right? As you know, if you read the book, we come up with, I think it's 9 or 10 principles about how change unfolds over time, how it gets catalyzed and unleashed. But we were after something different. We wanted to know what would be some phrases or statements that would be quick, that people could hang on to, that would enable them to keep moving forward, would enable them to stay grounded, and would enable them to stay focused on this practice that we have of turning outward. And so we went to the whiteboard like we often do, and we started to experiment. And to be honest with you, it didn't take us all that long. These 4 mantras, which we'll put up in a moment, these 4 mantras popped out really quickly. And the reason why they popped out so quickly was they not only reflected what was going on in these 9 communities, they captured the essence of what we had come to know about our work over 35 years. And so these 4 mantras, which many of you have seen: turn outward, get in motion, start small to go big, and create a new trajectory of hope, right? These are the 4 mantras, are really critical for dealing with all the things that you just mentioned, everything from pessimism to being stuck in old patterns, to feeling overwhelmed, to feeling burnout, to having anxiety about creating change, to worrying about the slow pace of change. So what I want to do is go through each of them with you and talk about them just for a moment, and then we'll have a conversation about them. So the first one is turning outward. And as you know, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do this work in community if we're not turned outward. Because the only way to see and hear people is to be turned outward, right? When we're turned outward, we can understand what matters to people, right? When we're turned outward, we can understand a deeper context of the community and the civic culture of the community. And when we're turned outward, we can afford people dignity, right? It's only when we're turned outward that we can do those things. So the first mantra, right? A mantra, as you know, is a slogan or a word or a statement that you repeat. I actually like the definition of mantra in Buddhism more. And that is that it's something that repeated that aids your concentration. It's something that is repeated that aids your concentration. So if you think about all the things that you came up with, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, burnout, lacking clarity about what to do, not having the right question yet. These mantras, if you start to use them and start to repeat them in your mind, they can aid your concentration in getting in motion, in staying grounded, and in using the practice, right? So these 4 mantras are what enable you to do that. And the more that you can make them part of your work, the more you can make them part of your life, the more you're going to find that you accelerate and deepen your efforts. So the first mantra is turned outward, which I just went over. The second mantra is get in motion, Now, the thing that when we're not in motion is when you're not in motion is when you feel the most overwhelmed because you're not moving anywhere. When you're not moving anywhere is when you feel often the most anxiety because nothing's happening, right? When you're not in motion, it's hard to gain clarity because everything might seem confusing. So here's what we know. The more you get in motion, the more you can allay some of the fears and anxiety you have because you're actually making something happen. The more you get in motion, the more you're in a learning mode because things are happening around you that you can learn from and then leverage and use to move forward. So you don't need to have all the answers up front. You don't need to have all the questions up front. You don't need all the steps up front. What you need to do is get in motion, and as you do, they will be revealed to you, right? They will be revealed to you. So the more in motion you are, the more you can learn. The more in motion you are, what happens is you make more discoveries along the way. Because more things are happening, things you never could have imagined before, or predicted before, or known before. The more you are in motion, the more new partners you will discover who are aligned to the things that you care about and that matters to the community. But for being in motion, you may never have discovered them. It's like discovering new friends. If you're not out and about, it's very hard to discover a new friend. Right? So in this sense, you have to be out and about in the community. And to do that, you have to be in motion. To be in motion, you're going to discover new opportunities that you couldn't have imagined before. And here's the other thing. It's when we have tons of research on this. It's when you're in motion that all of a sudden you encounter serendipity. That good things start to emerge out of what seems like out of nowhere, except for the fact that you've helped to create the conditions for them to emerge a lot of times. Right? Everyone with me here? So being in motion is an antidote to anxiety. Being in motion is an antidote to fear, because when you're in motion, you begin to realize you have agency. You have power. You have the ability to create and co-create with others. Right? Being in motion is an antidote to slow progress, because you are making progress along the way. And you're starting to see that. Okay, so that's the second one. If the first one's turning outward, the second one is get in motion. Here's the third one, which is really counterintuitive, but the more we use it, the more people like it, which is start small to go big. Start small to go big. When you read the Unleashed stories, every single story started with a relatively small action. Some were bigger than others and more systemic than others, but relative to where they ultimately went and what they ultimately produced, it was a relatively small action that got things going. As you all know, our tendencies is to start really big. Our tendencies is to think we have to have the comprehensive plan. Our tendency is to think we have to have all the answers at first, right? So our tendency is to think we have to take everything on all at once. That actually overwhelms us. That freezes us. That paralyzes us. Does that happen to anyone here on the call? Right? It's a non-starter for all of us. Right? It's like pulling the plug out of the electricity socket. We can't get anything going here. So here's the thing. If you can give yourself permission, and this is what's key to this part of it, you have to give yourself permission to start small with the intention that you're going to go big, with the intention that you're going to grow this, not with the intention that it's going to stay small. It can, and that's okay. But you're not giving up on creating larger impact. You're starting with something that's actionable, doable, and achievable, so that you can get things going, right? And you can grow them over time. And what we know is, here's what we know. Not believe, but know from experience now. The more you can start small to go big is the more that you're going to create momentum, right? We're all working out. The more you can start small to go big, the more likely it is you're going to create an upward trajectory of increasing momentum and ever expanding civic confidence. The key is you have to give yourself permission to start small. The key is you have to give yourself permission to start small. Okay, last one, new trajectory of hope. New trajectory of hope. I've yet to meet a person who hasn't told me that what they're after more than anything is a sense of possibility and hope. That tomorrow can be different than today. What they don't tell me is that every problem will be solved by tomorrow. I never hear that. In fact, what people say to me is, there's no way we can solve a lot of our problems by tomorrow. They're too big, they've been around too long. They're very systemic oftentimes, and it's going to take us some time. So what they really say is, can we get moving and get going in the right direction, which is this new trajectory of hope, right? So think about what creates hope. What creates hope is proof that things are happening, that there's a track record, that there's more than one thing, that they're happening over time, and that they're leading in a better direction, a desirable direction. Everyone with me here? So if you can think of your work not as an on-off switch, as either we've solved the problem or we haven't, but rather as an upward moving trajectory of hope, then what becomes important is not whether or not you have the answer. What becomes really important is whether or not you're producing enough actions over time that are leading in the right direction. That's different. That both liberates you from having to have the answer all at once, and it also holds you much more accountable to take action over time. So you're not off the hook. You're not off the hook, right? In fact, we're being more accountable because we're not making false promises. We're making real promises about what we're seeking to achieve over time. So these 4 mantras, when you think about it, provide sort of a way to keep moving, to stay grounded, and to stay focused on this practice, right? You got to be turned outward. You got to get emotion. You're going to start small to go big, and you're going to create a new trajectory of hope. If you can remember those 4 things, you're on your way. Of course, I want you to learn the rest of the practice. Of course, I want you to become really good at the rest of the practice because we know it's important. But if I'm being honest, what I know is if you can just keep these 4 mantras front and center all the time, you're going to be moving in the right direction. And you're going to be producing good things. So the other thing is that when you do this, you can build allies by sharing these mantras with others. Right? So you're actually all moving off the same set of principles. And the question is this: if these are the 4 mantras, right? Turn outward, get emotion, start small to go big, create a new trajectory of hope. What are 2 or 3 concrete ways you could apply these mantras? What are 2 or 3 concrete ways you could apply these mantras? Everyone ready? Let's start. Let's just jump into. So what are 2 or 3 concrete ways that you could apply these mantras in your work or life? Anyone? What's a way you could apply these?
Rich, it's Lisa Booksbound from Soaring Words. Thanks for hosting us today and sharing your
Sure.
wisdom. So I noticed when the banking crisis was happening that all those nice corporate sponsors that had supported our not-for-profit for many, many years were not going to give us a penny. So it was time to pivot. And I spent the last 3 months taking our 23 workshop initiative and making it 7. And just hearing your message today with these 4 mantras, it's so helpful because it's, just turn outward, get in motion, start small, create a new trajectory. So every morning when I wake up now, I'm going to just focus on what I did during the day, not the 1,001 things that I didn't get to do, and have it be enough. Give myself the little self-compassion. My team's really energized, and not let those nitty-gritty, shitty thoughts color all of the progress that we're making, because we're really making great progress and we believe in what we're doing. So all of these, doing something small, getting in motion, getting feedback, because even getting to know is positive because it brings us to go focus on the next thing.
Great.
So thank you. I'm going to put this on my forehead.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. Sherry?
Say something?
Yeah, I'm excited to hear you reinforce the start small to go big, because I think we're at a point in one of our projects where we have already turned outward. We've gotten the emotion, but now we need to deliver on people seeing some things happening. And we have a list of these smaller type items that we were worried people would think those aren't really valuable. But I'm now reinforced to say we can move forward with some of these, because then it will build that bigger picture and create that trajectory of hope, because people are ready. We don't want them to sit around and wait much longer. So I'm energized by that. And I think we have, here in the DeSoto County project, we're ready. We have these lists. We have a list of lots of small things we could really put in place.
Great, that's perfect. And one of the things I just want to underscore that you said is that people are ready to go. So in all of your communities, in each of your communities, there are people who are ready to go. And the more we sit in planning mode, the more they are sitting waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of waiting, how about if we get folks in motion and give them a sense of possibility, help them to develop and tap into their sense of agency, help to create some momentum. And as you know, the more momentum we create, the more others will join us, right? Particularly right now. Someone else, how else could you imagine concrete ways you could apply these?
I'm Lori Grobman. I live in Reading, near Reading, PA. And this afternoon at 4 is the first meeting of a subcommittee on an anti-violence coalition, a subcommittee on Reading's parks. And, we have so many huge ideas, and but even getting our first meeting together took like 2.5 weeks just because of everybody's schedules. So this idea that we don't have to get every park adopted right away, all 28 of them, we can start with, like, instead of creating a big plan to get all 28 parks adopted, we can start with 1 or 2 or 3. And once those happen, move ahead.
Right. Perfect example. So think about what would happen is, so then the question becomes, so just to take your point one step further and build on it, which 2 or 3 parks could we take that we could get in motion on, that we could demonstrate we're moving forward, right? So that would mean you want to be really intentional about which ones this is true for any action that you're taking, but in Lori, in your case, which 2 or 3 parks could we get moving on that have a readiness, where there's capabilities, where there's an appetite to get some movement on, because that then becomes the making. Not only are we getting in motion, not only are we starting small to go big, but here's the kicker. We're making a down payment on the new trajectory of hope, right? So you want to start with something that's actionable, doable, and achievable, meaning we can get it done. It's really important right now in American society and Canadian society, other places, to get stuff done. We have to make down payments. People don't believe change is possible anymore. So how do we get stuff done? And the more we do that, the more others will join us. And then you'll get to the rest of those 20 parks, the remaining 20 parks. So don't make the task impossible for you where you're going to get defeated. Win. We want to win. You need to win.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really glad to hear you doing that. I've been following that work, so it's great. Other ways that you could apply these mantras?
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
I'm Joyce Fitzpatrick. I moved to Sarasota about 5 years ago.
Hey, Joyce.
And during COVID, started a community mediation center. I just reached out to mediators who were interested in doing volunteer mediation, and we got a great board and we got started. And then all of a sudden, as far as I'm concerned, things came to a halt because the board wanted to set up a strategic plan and do all the background work, while the mediators who had volunteered were sitting there waiting. And 2 years later, they are still sitting there waiting. I dropped off the board saying, okay, if you guys want to do a strategic plan, more power to you, but I don't see anything happening. And I'm sorry now, I felt a little bit intimidated by the idea of a strategic plan. And so I said, okay, you know what you're doing, do it. I'm sorry that we just didn't start mediating. Start small, have the successes, with small mediations and build from that, kind of like experiential building or learning as we go.
Exactly. And here's the thing. If we insist on doing strategic plans too quickly, we will end up in a planning loop and never get moving. And to Joyce's point, I suspect, Joyce, that if you could keep moving, the plan itself begins to emerge out of the movement, because we're engaged in a different kind of learning. It's not learning in a conference room. It's not just working on a whiteboard. It's actually gaining enough experience so that experience can start to inform where we want to go next. And there's nothing that beats that experience. And so the notion, the word that you picked, experiential, is a fantastic word to use here, because and through them we can develop better ways of moving forward. So I see Elaine's hand up, and then last one, and then we'll keep moving here. Elaine, go ahead.
Yeah, Elaine Mayholt, Manatee County, Florida. I was just thinking too about, sharing these mantras with the group that you're working with, whether it's to real in depth or just touching on them, because then as you go through the steps, maybe if they're buying into the step, then they're realizing, okay, we're doing something small, and they're more accepting of it because they know that there's a something behind what we're doing or how we're doing it.
Right. So I believe in the chat box, there's a way to download these mantras. We'll also make sure that in follow-up emails you get that. So here's, Elaine, to your point, is not only do I want you to print this out for yourself, I want you to make as many copies of this as you want, right? It's not proprietary. It's not something the Institute's trying to hold on to. It's not something you need to pay for, though, if you want to send a donation, that'd be wonderful. That's a joke. There's nothing you have to pay for here. There's no fee. We want you to take these mantras and, to your point, share them with your partners, share them with your allies, talk about the meaning of them together, show them this webinar. We're going to post this webinar on our website, on our resources page, along with some other things that you can use. So use those resources on our webpage, right? So you can share this with them. And yes, it will help you build allies. You'll have a common vocabulary. You'll have a common notion of how you want to move forward together. You can always put them in the center of the table to remind yourselves during meetings or conversations about the ways in which we want to engage. And I can guarantee you from experience, you will be able to accelerate and deepen your work. So that's a great idea. Teresa, last one, go ahead, sorry.
Teresa Wiley from North Carolina, and we're one of the newest states probably that Rich is working with. For me, using these mantras, I started using it with myself first, just to process it and to see like how it worked, because I had to truly have buy-in to the mantras, and they actually worked. And so just with my own personal life to apply the mantras, and now I can bring some of my other colleagues along the way and have an example on how the mantras really can work with just starting small with something in my own personal life, but yet how do you can apply it to the community?
Great. Thanks, Teresa. Could you imagine how these might apply to your personal life? Anyone?
can
I
get
know
my closets.
Go ahead.
I know for me, like getting in motion and starting small apply to cleaning my house.
Right, right. We all have that. Exactly. Anyone else?
With grown children and relationships with a daughter-in-law and a one day to be daughter-in-law, just recognizing that in my life, my relationship with my mother-in-law blossomed and grew over the 35 years that she was alive. And it didn't happen in the first 6 months. So giving myself permission to make small steps and not have to micromanage everything has been very helpful because it gives room for other people to also come forward and live their own life. So these are all very applicable to personal.
Right. Anyone else?
When I have a big,
Go ahead.
go ahead. When I have a big project to do, I usually like to get the small or the little ones out of the way first. It often delays the big project, but in a way I feel clear. I have more clarity when I know there's not a lot of little things
Great.
back
Anyone
there
else?
that I should be doing.
Great. Thanks, Joyce. Anyone else?
I would
Jerome?
say as a mom of 2 teenage boys,
Mhm.
I turn outward towards them to understand that my job is to be creating the kind of world my kids want to have when they're older, not the kind of world I think my kids should want to have when they're older.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Jerome?
Yeah, I was very, very similar to Rachel. I was saying turning outward moves from a managing my own expectations to building anticipation. And that anticipation builds the excitement for what can happen. Because a lot of times when you're paralyzed by your own thoughts and your tiredness and your burnout, and it holds you hostage. So yeah.
Yeah. So the thing about these mantras and the thing about all of the Institute's work, as you know, or as you may know, and where all the meaning resides and the ability to move things is at the nexus between who we are as individuals and who we are as civic actors. It's at that nexus point, because at that nexus is where we are connecting the things that motivate us, the values that we hold, the things that are valuable to us, the things that animate us, and the kind of world that we're seeking to create with others. When those things get divorced, we're just acting in the civic world, in the public world, without being grounded, really, right? And without being connected to things that we think are really important. So these mantras, the reason why I asked you about how you might apply them to your personal life is these mantras require each of us, require each of you to step forward, right? In order to turn outward, you have to step forward. In order to get in motion, you have to step forward, right? They require each of us, each of you to make yourself visible, to say, here I am. They require each of you to lean in, right? We can't do this work. You can't turn outward. You can't get in motion. You can't start small to go big. You can't create a trajectory of hope without leaning in, right? So we can't be overridden by our anxieties and fears. We need to lean in. The way you lean in and deal with that is by turning outward and getting in motion. That allays some of that anxiety and fear. It creates a greater sense of agency, which further ameliorates or mitigates some of that anxiety and fear. Right? Getting in motion and turning outward and making yourself visible allays the fear that you're alone and you have to do this on your own. But you can't do it without yourself, right? You have to be present. You have to be awake. You have to be attuned. So there's no way to separate who you are from as an individual from who you are as a civic actor. It's at the nexus that the energy gets created, that things get animated, that things start to move forward, right? These mantras require that of you. But the good news is the more you use these mantras, the more they're going to feed you. Right? The more they're going to bring back to you. So here's Teresa Wiley. You just heard from her a moment ago. So when you use these mantras daily, you can see here's Teresa. She's got on the far left-hand side is the turning outward checklist, which is part of the North Star, which we're going to do in the next webinar. She's got her turning outward sign. Am I turned outward sign? She's even got this checklist on her dashboard in her car. I hope that doesn't cause any accidents. But in the far right-hand side, you can see she printed out or took one of our posters of the key mantras and put it on her cork board. And that's what we need each of you to do, okay? So let me go to some key takeaways for you as I'm mindful of time here. And that I want you to think about and really to do. The challenge is, can we do these together? One is make sure that you print the key mantras out. And to Lisa's point, she was going to put them on her forehead, put them in a place where you can see them. They're in the chat box. You can download them. So it's really important. You got to print them out. You need to post them where you can see them because they need to become daily reminders, right? They need to become daily habits. So you need to use the mantras in your daily life and work and spread them to others. And then this last point, I think, is really important. Notice and name how you're using them. Thanks, Tristan. We all know that if we don't name something that we're doing and it remains implicit, it doesn't fully become real. It doesn't fully become actualized. And so what becomes really important here is as you're using the mantras, as you're gaining experience with them, as you're benefiting from their use, as you're making progress in using them, make sure that you're noticing it, that you're taking notice of it, and make sure that you're naming what those experiences are bringing to you. All right. So in the last few minutes that we have left, there are two things that I want to do. Thanks, Tristan. We can pull the slide down. What are you taking away from this session?
All the possible ways to make this real, I think, in the work that we're doing in the community. There's lots of things we can talk about and envision in our own mind, but these 3 or 4 mantras really make me able to see the reality of this in my work.
Okay. Anyone else?
Share with others.
Right. We've got to share these with others.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I would say the emphasis placed on each one of these, that if they're not just the words on the paper, but how you emphasize them in terms of printing, posting, sharing, and then how you're actually using them and verbalizing how you're using them.
Right. So you can think of a mantra as print, post, use, share. You just gave me that, so thank you. Print, post, use, share.
Nice.
Print, post, use, share.
You have to put that on your forehead, Rich.
Yep.
I just want to thank you for doing this. And for me, this is so affirming because as the CEO and founder, you're inspiring everyone else, but just to see so many people here and to learn from your shares you know, we're not alone. We're all committed to doing this work, and I look forward to the next session you're going to lead us in. So
Yeah,
that's
great.
coming away with the vitality that we're not alone.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Gloria?
Hey, Rich, Gloria Dorsey, everybody, Atlanta Humane Society in Georgia. I have to say my takeaway from this wonderful opportunity is that these mantras are the gold and the reinforcement of what I learned in the Public Innovators Lab. Because after 2 years following completion of the lab, I finally was able to conduct the first of the 3 community conversations that you encouraged us to accomplish. And it was raw, but very eye-opening, and I learned a lot. And I have to say, what I came away with is that what we, in terms of my organization, is up against is that there are some bad actors out there, some community apathy, and some expectations that we will have to manage about who we are. But the beauty of it, and the number one accomplishment, was we got out of that planning loop and we actually did it. And so I am so tremendously grateful for what my first takeaway is.
Great. Congratulations on making that move. And Gloria, what I would say is the way in which to deal with that apathy and resistance and those things now is to stay turned outward, to get in motion, to start small, and to create a trajectory of hope. That's the way in all of our communities. We're going to deal with the resistance that we're facing. We're going to deal with the lack of hope and belief that people have that anything good can happen in public life anymore. It's the way in which we're going to attract more allies to the work that we're doing. So keep that in mind. Any other quick takeaways before we, I want to stick to the hour that we have. Any last ones? Someone wants to mention?
I've
I'll
got
go.
one.
Oh, go ahead,
Okay.
Sherry.
Whoever said that, you go first.
Oh, okay. I would say that just based on what we talked about in the beginning about everybody being overwhelmed and overworked and bandwidth and sort of having the energy to sort of push through it, use these mantras as ways to re-energize yourself, but also refocus, and use it as a way to get out of that space. And it's a very difficult space, and don't think you have to do it overnight. But as you learn to apply the tools, you'll get stronger and you'll be a little more resilient in when you have those challenges, you're able to manage through them a little easier. They're still going to be there, but you'll be able to manage through them a little easier.
Great. Thanks, Dawn Marie. All right, last one, Sherry.
Yeah, I'm today's given me sort of a sense of I have to try to convince other funders in partnership for some of these smaller initiatives. And I'm excited. I heard some things today that I think can be shared with people that may not have fully worked with the Harwood principles, but then we'll see that these mantras are a way forward for partnership and funding. So I hope I can share success with you on that in the future.
Excellent. All right. So let me tell you about the next webinar that's coming up. So this is going to be on the North Star. This is another new thing that the Institute's been developing over the last few years. We've gone through a number of iterations already. And what this is it's just a quick fold out that you can see on the far left-hand side of that little fold out picture, that you can see the mantras there. It also illuminates or captures key parts of the practice that if you sort of stay focused on these key parts of the practice with the mantras, you can make progress. And on the back end, much like in the picture that we had of Teresa, there's a checklist that enables you to get in motion and get moving. And so these are the first steps that we're asking people to really take. So next webinar is going through the North Star and making sure you have a copy of it, making sure you can download it so you can provide copies to other folks that you're working with in your communities. Because again, we want you to share this stuff as far and wide as you possibly can. I think there was just a link in the chat box drop that you can register for that now, but you'll also be getting emails as well. So let's pull it on the slide and then we can just close up. So I just want to thank you for spending the hour. We're going to keep these to an hour. So you know that we're coming in at a certain time and you're guaranteed to leave at a certain time so you can plan your day and it's not onerous or burdensome. So we'll do these and we'll keep them moving as we do. I just want to stop or finish where I began, which is the Institute, much like you, is continuing to learn every day. Even though we've been doing this work for 35 years now, we're continuing to learn. We're continuing to innovate. And our commitment to you, and it is a commitment, is that we want to make this learning and this innovation available to you because you're doing the work in communities. And we want to be supportive of that work that you're doing. And so this new basics webinar series is a down payment. It's just, think of this as the down payment on the trajectory of our own trajectory of hope that we're trying to create. It's a down payment on sharing with you some of these new learnings and innovation that can help you accelerate and deepen your work and stay grounded as you do that. As I said before, you're going to start to receive some emails about, have you printed out the mantras? Have you posted the mantras? Are you using the mantras? Have you spread the mantras? What are you learning in using them, right? So this will be a way for us just to give you gentle reminders. And along the way, we would love for you to share your stories. Everything from taking your picture about where you posted it, to sharing how you've used it, to sharing how maybe some of your allies or partners are coming along and are changing their own mindsets and behaviors in doing that. And then we want to be able to share your stories with others as well. We're all in this together. We're only going to make the world a better place by working together. We need each other. And so I hope you come to the next webinar. I hope you bring some friends along with you. They don't need to know anything about the Institute's work or have been exposed to the Institute's work before. We want to keep growing this network so we can actually create a positive force in society for the kinds of communities that we're all trying to create together. So thanks for joining us. I hope you have a good rest of your week. And it's great to see familiar faces and great to see new faces and hear some voices, and we'll be in touch. So thanks so much.
Bye, Rich. Thank you.